Hello, and welcome to Back to Basics, a series of videos where I explore the most iconic technological innovations from Veeam and revisit the fundamentals that have contributed to Veeam's success for over 15 years. Today, we are going to talk about one of Veeam's most iconic technological innovations. It is an innovation that has profoundly changed the way of restoring the traditional approach to restoring virtual machines. And it can be said that this is an innovation that completely disrupted the data protection industry about 15 years ago. This innovation is instant recovery. Today, there are several forms of instant recovery. Instant recovery for virtual machines, instant recovery for physical machines, instant recovery for SQL database, Oracle database, PostgreSQL database, and instant recovery for NAS. In this video, I will talk to you about instant recovery for virtual machines. Let's go. To illustrate, before going into more detail about the instant recovery of virtual machines, I suggest we better understand the mechanism and the brilliant trick that lies behind instant recovery as we know it today. Initially, in this diagram, we have on the left the traditional restoration approach that we will examine first. Before performing a restoration, backups are needed. So, what we see here are virtual machines that are on hypervisors. The nature of the hypervisor is not very important at this time, and these virtual machines are backed up to a storage repository. So, something classic. We have a backup on this repository. So this is the starting point. If we find ourselves with the unavailability of this virtual machine, we need to restore this virtual machine. It needs to be restored. And the traditional restoration approach is a conventional method that initially involves what is called a data extraction from this virtual machine, from the backup to the production storage. And to represent all of this, we will illustrate it here on the diagram. First extraction step. This initial step was therefore called step number 1 in the process. Extract. The problem with this first step is that it is a step that is very time-consuming. This is a time-consuming step as it involves extracting the data that is located here, the data from the virtual machine. We will extract it from the backup archive from the repository, and then we will pass this data through the pipe that is available on the infrastructure, so on the network. And then we will write this data to the storage. This means that the duration of this step 1 directly depends on the read performance of the repository. It will depend on the available bandwidth to transfer the data and rely on the write performance of the storage. So, if you have a virtual machine of 10 or 20 terabytes, for example, the restoration time, and therefore the duration of unavailability of this VM, is several hours in environments with adequate bandwidth, and potentially several days if the bandwidth is very low. And so once this step 1 is completed, the final step, or step 2, is the startup of this machine. And so to start it, having something that looks like this, we will have a startup that goes from here to the started virtual machine, and we get the new virtual machine here that we will represent there in a step-by-step manner, in a clear and detailed way, ensuring that every step is well understood and properly executed. Above that, starts. And so this step, which is step 2, is the startup step. We will call it Start VM or Power on VM. So, in general, typically speaking, in summary, the extract is a step that can take a long time, with an RTO that is greater than several hours. So, in summary, the traditional restoration method is first step 1, data extraction. And so it's this step that really takes time. Then, in the second step, we start the virtual machine, either a start or a power on of the virtual machine. So this is the traditional method of restoring a virtual machine. And so, 15 years ago, The R&D engineers at Veeam had a brilliant idea. Very simple, as you will see. They said to themselves, if the traditional restoration process is as described here, if we can reverse it to have an inversion of this restoration process, well, we have everything to gain, since instead of extracting and starting, we will rather begin with 1 with 2, sorry. And then here start initially, firstly, then and the 1 extract. So, this reversal of the traditional restoration process is the brilliant idea that underlies instant recovery. Instant recovery, thanks to this reversal of the restoration process, will allow for the direct startup of the virtual machine from the backup without waiting for the extraction step to be completed. And if we need to illustrate all of this from the other side, we will have the first step. So if we lose this machine, if I lose this virtual machine, I want to restore it. I want to restore it with a very short RTO, reducing the RTO to a minimal value. Well, we will use instant recovery, and thanks to instant recovery, we will, in order to have an instant recovery from the backup like this quickly and efficiently, we will represent the machine that is started in this way, this virtual machine. Started instantly, without any delay or hesitation, here, in this very moment. And so this first step, the initial step, is our startup step, the beginning of our journey. Start, commence, initiate. We start by starting the machine directly from the backup without performing a restoration, which allows for a very quick recovery with an optimal RTO. This method ensures that the data is available almost immediately, providing a seamless experience for users. Then, the extraction step will be done in a second phase, and we will represent the extraction step here in the same way as before. The second phase involves a detailed extraction process, which will be thoroughly explained. So, we first have the startup of. We will also cover the startup procedures in detail to ensure clarity. And this is the instant recovery. So we will see all of this through a quick demonstration to get a glimpse of how it works in the console, in the Veeam interface, and also on the infrastructure side. And so for this demo, I will use VMware infrastructure. And I will use this small virtual machine to redo my demonstration. So it's a small PostgreSQL VM that has currently started. We can see that it responds to the ping here. So I did a continuous ping. You have its IP address. It is 100.81. So you can see that it responds. So what we are going to do is shut down this virtual machine to simulate its unavailability. Then we will perform an instant recovery from the Veeam interface to see a bit how it is triggered and what the workflow is for using this technology in more detail, step by step, and thoroughly understand. So, to simulate this virtual machine, to simulate its unavailability, we will first turn it off. We will perform a power off. And then we will delete it. And we will do a delete from the disk permanently and completely. There you go, obviously. It no longer responds to ping. So we have indeed lost this virtual machine. So I'm coming back here. I'm going to perform an instant recovery of this VM. So this machine I have backed up here, it's there. PostgreSQL, I right click and start the instant recovery in the console. I carefully select, I leave the machine, it is well selected. I am going to restore to the original location. You can restore to a different location, but here we really want to restore it to its original location. So I will leave the option selected by default. And on next, I will ask Veeam to connect the machine to the network and to start this machine after the restoration. I click Finish and start the process. And we are going to have some fun launching a little timer to see how long it takes for this machine to come back to life, how long it takes for this machine to be restored again. So, we can see that there are starting to be a number of things on the Veeam side. Registering VM, if you look to the side, you see the VM has come back here, PostgreSQL. You see it is starting to be rebooted. And what is interesting is that you see here at the data store level, you have a data store called Vim Backup VBR. This means that currently this machine, the files of this VM, are stored in a data store that is seen under the name Vim Backup VBR by the ESX. If I come back here, the first step is complete. So the direct booting from the backup has just been finished. And we can see here, by the way, that the VM is responding to ping again. It is fully operational again. Therefore, it is an instant restoration, a reactivation of this server that took about a minute, lasting just a few minutes. Technically speaking, the restoration is not finalized at this moment. This is the first step. If you remember my diagram, the first boot step is step 1, where we boot directly from the backup. We can clearly see here, once again, when we return, that the machine has successfully started from the backup, since its data store is a Vim data store. This is a data store that is presented. It is a data store that is virtually presented by the Veeam backup server. So, what we are going to do is trigger the second step. So, to finalize this restoration, just come back here and instant decorate. PostgreSQL, right-click, migrate to production. And it is this operation that will finalize the restoration by moving the data blocks of this virtual machine from the backup to production storage using VMware's hot migration technologies, such as storage in motion, or the equivalent in Hyper-V, which is live migration. So this step of finalization and extraction is done without any interruption and without any downtime for the machine. You will see it. We are going to start this migration. We complete the final steps of and will carefully and gently let the migration operation process entirely complete. And so we can see that the migration is finished. The extraction and migration process to production is now successfully complete. If we take a look at the VMware side, we can see here in the data store that the data store is again the one used by this VM initially. Data store 2 was indeed the belonging data store for this PostgreSQL machine. This machine is fully restored. We started by booting it up, and it became operational very quickly, in just a few minutes. Then, the migration and finalization of the restoration is a process that took place in the background, without any interruptions and without any impact. As you could see on the right, at no point was there a ping drop during this extraction phase and the relocation and migration phase of the virtual machine to its original location. There you go. That was the moment of virtual machine recovery. I hope you learned some things. In the upcoming videos, I suggest we explore and discuss other forms of recovery moments. We will talk about the recovery point of physical machines, databases, and the recovery point of NAS. Thank you. Goodbye.